band this morning. It's C3 Youth Sunday. That's why all these people are wearing these green shirts. It's why there's students everywhere, from playing in the band to changing diapers in the nursery to leading small groups, elementary, to waving at you out in the parking lot, or even there's some students back here that you can't see, and you won't be able to see it all the whole time. But like Jackson Tyndall is up there, and he's making me look really good right now. I asked him to take 20 pounds off on the online feed, so he's making me look really good up there. So thanks, Jackson, for doing that for me. But also, we've got a lot of adults who were here helping us as well. So you might see some people that don't look like high school students that are wearing these shirts, and that's because they aren't high school students, but they're helping us make this happen and go off without a hitch. So I want to thank all of them that are helping and gave up. Were here early this morning and gave up some of their time to help make this happen. I'm a big movie buff. Anybody else a big movie buff in here? You guys like watching movies? Okay, some of you are honest. Some of you are a little shy a little bit this morning. That's fine. Okay, some of you might hate movies too. That's fine. That's totally fine. But I could probably watch a movie. If my wife would let me, I'd probably watch a movie every night. Like I could literally have every night would be movie night. Let's pop some popcorn, throw some M&Ms on there, and let's have a movie night. Literally every night I would do it. But I want you to imagine this with me. So I want you to do something for me. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to try to imagine this for a second. I want you to try to imagine the most intense movie scene you can remember. Okay? So try to imagine it. Close your eyes. Think of it. Try to imagine the most intense movie scene you ever. Your heart's racing a little bit more. Like your breath gets a little bit short, and maybe you're not breathing at all. And it's just really intense. Okay, now you can open your eyes. That's fine. That's fine. You can open your eyes right there. I don't know, did anybody have one come to mind immediately you want to shout out right now? Nobody in the first service had any either. That's fine. Okay, but what? Endgame. Oh, Avengers Endgame. Anybody? Avengers Endgame there? Okay, that's a good one. Okay, I've got a few that I would like to share with you, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to, if you know it, or if you're like, yeah, that resonates, I want you to just murmur in the crowd, okay? I want you to be like, like that. That's really what I want, okay? So let's see if you know this first one. Anybody know this movie? Shout it out if you know. What's the name of this movie? Fugitive. The Fugitive. Anybody? Big Fugitive fans? I don't know if this was an intense scene for me watching The Fugitive. This is a classic, guys. Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones, but Tommy Lee Jones is the deputy. He's chasing, and this is like the end of the drain scene. He's like down like inside of this dam, and this drain scene, Tommy Lee Jones fumbles his gun, and Richard Kimball, the fugitive, finds it, and he has it, and he just says, I didn't kill my wife. Sorry, I'm ruining this movie for you, okay? I didn't kill my wife. And you guys remember what Tommy Lee Jones says? Anybody know? I don't care is what he says. That's one of the best lines of the entire movie, right? But yeah, if you know that, you know how that ends. Okay, let's see if you know this one. What about this next one? Anybody? Jaws, right? Jaws, you know, Sheriff Brody is out there scooping chum into the ocean. They're trying to get rid of this huge beast in the sea, right? And he scooping chum out there and then sees and encounters the shark for the first time, backs up, and he keeps backing up. What does he say when he gets into the... Yeah, we're going to need a bigger boat, right? That's pretty good. Actually, that was an improvised line. I don't know if you guys know that. Fun fact, it was an improvised line. It was like something that the cast kept saying, we're going to need a bigger boat if we're really going to be attacking, and he actually said it in the screen. That's pretty cool. Said it there. Okay, what about this one? Yeah, that's great. Did somebody say Harry Potter? Did somebody say Harry Potter? It's probably one of my students who said Harry Potter. This is the Lord of the Rings, okay? That's what this is. You know I had to throw Lord of the Rings in there, okay? Gollum leads Frodo into this cave, and it's a big spider's going to attack him, okay? Let's go past it. I can't stand to watch that one. Okay, next one. Right? Jurassic Park. I feel like somebody's been in here before, maybe. Roland up there. Been in here before. He was in here first service, right? All you can hear is the guy who has the injured leg in the back saying, must go faster, right? Remember that scene? Or have you seen, this is the last one, have you seen this movie? Anybody seen that movie? A Quiet Place. That's what this is. I made the mistake of watching this movie in the theaters and ordering popcorn when I went to watch it because I couldn't eat any of it. It was completely silent the whole time. If I ate popcorn, everybody was going to look at me like, what are you doing eating popcorn, man? I'm enjoying a movie. I'm trying to enjoy a movie. But after the movie was done, it's like a short, like not even an hour and a half long, and it felt like everybody collectively just went, oh, okay, finally. We're done with that. I love watching intense movies with my father-in-law because he can't handle intense movies, okay? He can't handle like the intense moments. Anybody else like that? When it comes to movies you can't handle, I see people pointing at the people next to them, right? Okay, can't handle those intense moments. My father-in-law, I love it whenever we get to an intense, and it's not even like a Quiet Place intense. It's like movies that really aren't that intense, but he just can't handle it. So he'll just pause it, be like, "Are we sure we want to keep watching this? I don't know if we want to keep watching this. Are you guys sure?" But now he just stands up and walks out of the room if it gets to an intense point. He just gets up and just strolls out and kind of just takes some deep breaths and has some thoughts to himself, and then he like maybe go grab a glass of water, and then he comes back and he kind of pokes his head, and if it's still happening, he's like, nope, I'm just going to stay out here. He just can't handle the intense moments. We're going to be in Luke chapter 11 this morning, so if you want to turn over to Luke chapter 11, I want to give you some context of our text this morning. Robin mentioned it last week. We're in the middle of like a shift in Jesus' ministry. In Luke chapter 9, it says that Jesus like resolutely set out for Jerusalem, that he set his face towards Jerusalem, right? Like this is, and most scholars believe that we're into the final year of his life. Like there's some discrepancy there sometimes, but most of them think, yeah, we're into this final year of Jesus' life. And really the interesting part about this, when Jesus sets his face towards Jerusalem, when he's in the last year of his ministry, the last year of his 3-year ministry, his tone shifts in this last year of his ministry. I think maybe he's just kind of done with everything he's seen the first 2 years of his ministry, and he's just going to tell it like it is. Like Jesus normally isn't one to pull any punches, right? He's not one to withhold anything or withhold the truth that they need to hear, but really he does it pretty harshly in our text today, and really the rest of his ministry. One scholar says it this way. He says, during the final year of our Lord's life, his ministry consisted primarily of warning and judgment, and it was marked by a constantly escalating conflict with the Jewish religious leaders. It's like the tension is building, right? It's like the intense scene of a movie is what we're getting at, right? Here's the thing. Sometimes I think we think of Jesus' earthly ministry, and what we think of is just the positive stuff. Like we think of the stuff that makes us feel good. We think of the times he healed people or did miracles or fed the 5,000, right? Or we think of the prodigal son who's being welcomed home with wide open arms, right? And listen to me, none of those things are bad. Jesus is a loving guy, okay? He's representing a loving God. This is who he is. He's a loving and compassionate and grace-filled God. But sometimes our picture of Jesus is only the positive. It's like soft and gentle teaching on the love of God. It's good feelings. It's the healings and miracles. And all the while, Jesus is like, has a newborn infant in one hand and a baby lamb in the other as he's doing all these things, right? Like that's sometimes that can be our picture of who Jesus is. And we like to ignore these more confrontational passages. But I think if we do that, we don't have a complete picture of our God. I think if we do that, we miss the complete picture of who Jesus is. If I could quote Rocky Balboa, he says, the world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. And I think that's the truth with Jesus' teaching. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. We'd like to think it is sometimes, but it ain't all sunshine and rainbows. So this point of Jesus' life, what we're getting at today in Luke chapter 11, is the intense scene of a movie. We might like to pause it. We might like to skip on over, turn the page in our Bible and pretend it's not there. We might like to just walk out of the room. But we're going to have an incomplete picture of Jesus if we do that. So more specifically, Robin talked last week about, like in the text right before that, the tension's been building for a little bit, but Jesus kind of like drew a line in the sand and basically said, you're either with me or you're against me. You either gather with me or you're scattering, right? Earlier right after that, right on the heels of that, earlier in chapter 11, Jesus says, I'm not going to give this generation a sign. This is an evil and a wicked generation is what he says. He's not pulling any punches, right? And he's going to continue in that in our text. But one more thing, this text happens at a Pharisee's house, okay? The text that we're going to be in. This is a Pharisee, an unnamed Pharisee, has invited Jesus over after he's teaching. He's invited him over to dine with him. We think there's other people there, other Pharisees there, other teachers of the law there because one of them speaks up later on in our text. But this is the setting. Now, you might remember, this isn't the first time that Jesus has been asked to come into a Pharisee's house and to have dinner, to share a meal. The first one was in chapter 7 of Luke, whenever Simon the Pharisee invited him over. And in the middle of that, this sinful woman walks in off the street. And that's her title that's given in Luke, is that she is a sinner, right? And she comes and she's weeping all over Jesus, and she's drying her tears with her hair off of his feet, and then she breaks this alabaster jar of ointment and she worships him, right? And Simon the Pharisee just thinks to himself, if this guy was a prophet, he would know that that's a sinner that's touching him, right? And it's crazy. One of the most incredible power plays that Jesus ever does, right, is he just answers Simon. Answers his thoughts. Like he knew what Simon was thinking, and he answered his thoughts. That's pretty powerful right there, right? And he says, no, she's the one who's welcomed me more than anybody else has in your entire house, right? She's the one who's worshiped me for all that I deserve, right? And this is the kind of worship I'm going to accept. Jesus always uses meals as opportunities to teach and to correct. And he's definitely going to do that in our passage today. Let's jump straight into verse 38. So Pharisee has invited him over, and it says, but the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not first wash before the meal. Let me explain this just a little bit, okay? This isn't like Jesus was filthy dirty and he needed to take a bath, and he'd been rolling around in the dirt in the backyard all day, and like he was just completely dirty, right? This was an added ceremonial washing that the Pharisees and the teachers of the law had added to the law of Moses, right, that they performed so that they would be ceremonially clean. But it wasn't something that God commanded. This was something that they had added in. And it says the Pharisee was surprised that he didn't do this added in thing. That's the first thing. Then the Lord said to him, see what he did? He's answering the Pharisee's thoughts, that he was surprised again. He says, now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. Talk about an introduction, right? Like this guy just opened up his house and like had him over for dinner. We had some friends had us over for dinner at the end of this week, and the first thing I said to them was, hey, thanks so much for having us over. This is awesome. Thanks for having us over. I didn't say, you guys like to clean up your house when we come over, but I know inside here it's just full of greed and wickedness, right? Like I didn't start with that, right? This is very harsh of Jesus right off the bat. Like he's super harsh here. And he says, you foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But now, as for you, what is inside of you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. This is the main point that Jesus keeps coming back to, is this idea, as he keeps rebuking, he's going to keep going and keep saying, woe to you, Pharisees, woe to you, experts of the law. But as he keeps going, it all kind of comes back to this. You wash the outside of the cup, but inside you're full of filth. The parallel passage in Matthew 23, you might have heard this when Jesus calls the Pharisees whitewashed tombs. Like outside you look clean and pure, but inside there's nothing but decay and death and rot. But there's a reason I think that Jesus' tone is so intense, is Jesus knows the people he is addressing are the leaders of the church, right? They're the ones who are supposed to be leading the church. They're the ones who are supposed to be spiritually leading the nation of Israel. So he's extra serious here. He knows that they're the ones that are supposed to be influencing the relationship with God. They're the ones who are supposed to be the example to follow. But they clean the outside appearance, but inside they're filthy. See, Jesus realized this isn't just impacting them, but it's impacting the entire nation of Israel. How they're living, how they're choosing to live. He goes on in verse 47 through 52, he says this, woe to you because you build tombs for the prophets and it was your ancestors who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and others they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that have been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Woe to you, experts of the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who are entering. If you look at Jesus' life, you look at his ministry, you'll notice pretty quick that Jesus takes exception anytime someone shuts a door to the kingdom of God for somebody else. Anytime that someone prohibits someone else from coming to know the Lord. Like, this is exactly what the Pharisees are doing. They clean the outside of the cup, but inside they're filthy, and it hinders people from coming to know Jesus. But the truth is that this isn't just for the Pharisees. Like, this is a warning for us as well this morning. Like, this is the part of the story, honestly, where you might want to just hit pause and watch something else. Or you might want to flip over, you might want to just walk out of the room. But I need to implore you, don't walk out of the room. Don't mentally check out right here. Sometimes I think even, I'm the worst of it. I think sometimes I sit and I listen to sermons even from this stage, and I hear sermons on passages, and I think there's thoughts sometimes that come in my head. They're like, man, this person really needs to hear that. Man, they really need to hear the truth of this message, right? Like, I know how they're living. They really need to hear this. And honestly, every time I think those thoughts, I resemble the Pharisees a lot more than I'd like to admit. Whenever I think those thoughts. When I think, man, this would be really good for him or her or them to hear. And I think I'm a lot closer to the Pharisees than I would like to admit. So let me implore you, don't assume this is for somebody else. This is for you, church. This is for us this morning. Let's hear the words of Jesus. This is what Jesus says. I think we wash the outside of our cups when we do all these religious things, but we neglect the heart of God. This is what Jesus says in verse 42. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give a tenth of your mint, your rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. This is the first warning he gives, is something that we do all these religious Christian things, but we are missing the point. We're missing the heart of God. We're neglecting the heart of God. Here's the deal. We do a lot of religious things. Even like here at Carterville Christian Church, we do a lot of religious things, right? Like literally right before I walked up on the stage, we all took communion together. That's something that the Bible commands that we need to do, that we need to remember our Lord and Savior, right? Like that's a religious thing. We gather together once a week, right? We gather together and we worship, we stand and we sing and we give, right? All of these things I would consider religious things. They could fall into that religious category. But here's, I think sometimes, I think how we miss the point is we have like a checklist. And we just go through to check off our list. We say like, okay, I went to church. I even came early to church and had a conversation with somebody I served on C3U Sunday, right? I served in my month on, month off rotation. I took my communion. I served. I read my Bible. I gave my offering. I didn't fall asleep during the sermon, right? We check off. We got all these religious to-do list thing that we check off, and none of those things, honestly, are bad in and of themselves. But I think sometimes when we have a religious checklist, to-do list, often it can become our measuring stick to how good of a Christian we are. It can become, man, I've done this, and this, so yeah, I deserve the love of God, right? Like he better bless me. Look at all the things I've given, right? Look at all the things I've done. Sometimes, honestly, our checklist becomes the most important thing, and we become blind to the neighbor next to us. We become blind next to that person who's sitting right next to us in this room. Or we become blind to that coworker who really just needs someone who has the answer of where I can find hope. Or we become blind to our kids sometimes and what they're going through. We become blind to our spouses. We become blind to our neighbor. If you think about this, like just before this, a chapter before our text this morning, Jesus tells this story. Actually, one of the experts of the law, one of the guys he's addressing in this passage, in our passage, comes to him and says, "Teacher, what must I do to be saved?" And Jesus just said, "Well, you're the expert in the law. Tell me what the law says." And he says, "Well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus says, "Well, there you go. You got it. Do that and you will live," right? And the lawyer, it says he's trying to justify himself, is what he says. Trying to justify himself, says, "And who is my neighbor?" I love what one author says. He says, "Anyone who asks, 'Who is my neighbor?' is not a good neighbor," is what he said. And Jesus tells the story. You know the story. This man, this Jewish man is on his way, traveling on the road. He gets like flogged by some robbers, left within an inch of his life, stripped of everything he owns, right? And he's left on the side of the road. And then there's this priest coming by, one of the spiritual leaders of the nation, right? Walks by and sees the man and passes on the other side of the road to stay away from him, to keep himself clean. The Levite comes and sees that the guy who's from the priestly tribe of Israel, right, comes and he sees the man on the side of the road, and he does the exact same thing. To keep himself clean, he passes on the other side of the road. And I think sometimes we're like the priest and the Levite. Sometimes we're more interested with our religious to-do list than we are about the one who needs our help on the side of the road. Sometimes we're more interested with all the things we have done right than living out the justice and the love of God on a regular basis. So you know the story. The Samaritan comes by, the one who's hated among all the Jewish people, comes by and he sees the man on the side of the road and he had compassion on him, takes him, binds up his wounds, takes care of him, puts him up in the inn, and pays for everything. I'm reminded of a passage that talks about Jesus in Matthew chapter 9 when it says that he looked at the crowd. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Like that's the kind of compassion. See, James 1:27 says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep one from being polluted by the world. See, here's the deal. We wash the outside of our cups. Man, when we do all these religious things, when we are Sunday Christians, and it doesn't impact the rest of our life, we miss the heart of God, and we neglect our neighbor. Here's the other thing Jesus says. He says we wash the outside of our cups when we think too highly of ourselves. Wash the outside of the cups when we think too highly of ourselves. Keep reading with me in verse 43 and 44. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and respectful greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves, which people walk over without even knowing it. In this day, if someone were to come in contact with a grave or a corpse, they were ceremonially unclean. Like for 7 days, there was a 7-day ritual they would have to go through where they couldn't complete any of their religious duties. After that, they couldn't come into the presence of God at all if they came in contact. So what Jesus is saying to the Pharisees is not, hey, you guys are ceremonially unclean. He's taken it a step further. And he's saying, no, because you're so wicked on the inside, because you just wash the outside of your cup and never look on the inside of your cup, like everyone who comes in contact with you is now unclean. Everyone who comes in contact with you is now contaminated. Like this is what it is. This is what Jesus is saying to them. And the crazy thing about the Pharisees is that they don't even realize it. Like they don't even realize that they are sinful. They don't even realize that they are filled with nothing but filth and rot and death. And somebody said it this way. He said, there's something worse than our sin. It's the hypocrisy about our sin. It's the fact that, man, sometimes what's worse than the fact that we are sinners is the fact that we don't realize that we are sinners. I read the story about this cowboy in New Mexico. He walked into a bar and he ordered 3 beers. And he went and sat down towards the back of the bar, and he started drinking the beers in turn. So he would take a sip, and then take a sip, and then take a sip. And he did that all the way down until they were all gone, right? And he came back up and ordered 3 more beers at the bar, and the bartender said, hey, you know, they start going bad as soon as I pour them. So it'd be better if you just ordered one at a time. They'd taste better if you just order it one at a time. And he said, oh, well, here's the situation. I've got 2 brothers. One's in Flagstaff, one's in Albuquerque, and when we left home, we promised each other that every time we would drink in this way to remember the times we were able to drink together. And the bartender said, oh, that's a nice custom. So this is what the cowboy did. He became a regular at this bar, would walk in, and every time he would order 3 beers and drink them in turn. Until one day he walked in, and he went up to the bar, and he ordered 2 beers. And he went to the back of the room, and he drank them. All the regulars in the bar noticed, like took note, and they just fell silent. And when he went back up, he went back up and ordered 2 more beers, and when he went back up there, the bartender said, "We don't want to intrude on your grief, but we wanted to offer our condolences on your loss." And the cowboy is kind of like taken back, and he's kind of confused. He's like, and then it's like a light bulb went off, and he's like, "Oh," and he starts laughing. He said, No, listen, we're everybody's just fine. It's just that my wife and I joined the Baptist church, and I had to quit drinking. It just hasn't affected my brothers, though." That's what he said. Here's the thing. Here's the point. Sometimes what's worse than the fact that we are sinners is the fact that we don't even realize it. Sometimes we change what we want to about our lives to make us feel better about ourselves. Like we only change to a point, to a certain point, because that certain point makes us feel better than, here's the blank. Put whoever you want to in that blank. And really, honestly, our salvation becomes a matter of comparing ourselves to other people. As long as I'm better than the majority, I'm fine, right? Man, we are so crooked if we think so highly of ourselves that we don't really see our need for a Savior. See, sometimes what's worse is the fact that we are sinners, is the fact that we don't realize that we are. And let's not be quick to forget this truth of our condition, that we have failed, that we fall short, that we deserve the wrath of God. That's what we deserve based on our lives, based on our choices, based on our decisions. We deserve the wrath of God. Man, it's whenever we do that, when we realize that the ground is level at the foot of the cross, man, it helps us to realize that we shouldn't think this highly of ourselves. We shouldn't think too highly of ourselves. Man, we wash the outside of our cups. And let me just be completely real about this. Like, I realize the irony. I don't know if you guys realize the irony. I'm the one who brought a trophy up here on stage last week, right? We're talking about pride right now, and I'm the one who brought a big mirror ball trophy up here for a dance competition, right? Like, I realize the irony. I think God might be trying to teach me something this morning. But let's not be so foolish to think that we've earned something. Like, that's whenever pride gets into the depths of our hearts, is whenever we think, man, I've done enough to earn something. And that's exactly where the Pharisees are. They wash the outside of our cups, and we wash the outside of our cups when we think too highly of ourselves. But Jesus keeps going, and he says, we wash the outside of our cups when we're quick to criticize, but we're slow to help. When we're quick to criticize and slow to help. This is verse 45. One of the experts of the law answered him, "Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also." I think this is a really ironic verse here. It's like, well, duh. Of course, you should be insulted by this. And it's almost like he's like reminding Jesus, because Jesus is like, oh yeah, forgot about you experts of the law. Thanks for reminding me. Woe to you as well is what he says. You load people down with burdens that they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. Quick to criticize, slow to help. I think that's a pretty good definition of the church sometimes. I think sometimes it's a pretty good, well, it's obviously was a pretty good definition of the church in Jesus' time as well, that these experts of the law, they added so many conditions to the law, so many like little loopholes in the law that they made, like they were like, this is how you need to live. It's all these different things. Let's add to the law to add to this burden, but then they also knew every little bypass to get around it for themselves. Like they could put this burden on the people. They could put this burden on the people and then like omit themselves when it was convenient. Like say, yeah, you guys have to do this, but whenever I'll just skirt around it however I want to. Right? This is what's happening. When I was in college, I helped at like an after-school program for the YMCA in Joplin. I was at Royal Heights Elementary, and I was basically there to help students, like just after school, just to be with them, right? So I helped them with homework sometimes, which probably wasn't the best idea, right? But then I also was just basically there to like play games with them and hang out with them until their parents were able to get off work and come get them. And I will never forget this fourth grade boy who always wanted to, he was super competitive and wanted to play games like against me specifically. He was like, I don't know what He just like, I'm going to beat you, is what his thought was. And I don't know if you know this about me, I'm pretty competitive. So I was like, no, you're not. You're not going to beat me. You kidding me? I'm not going to let this fourth grader. I was 19. It's not supposed to be impressive, okay, that I can beat a fourth grader, okay? But still, it was, okay? But he always, it was everything. He always wanted to play just games one-on-one with me and try to beat me. So, it was like obstacle course or something. He would, lay out all the rules, all the ground rules. Here's what you have to do. You have to jump over this, have to climb through this, have to run around this 3 times, and then run back or something like that, right? But then I would obliterate him every single time, right? On whatever game it was, there was no mercy. I was like, yeah, I'm going to show you how you win, right? I was just all about it, right? But here's what would happen. Here's what started to happen with this fourth grade boy. He started when we would play games and he would lay out the rules of an obstacle course. And then we would be in the middle of it, and he would start changing the rules on me. I don't know if you guys have ever played games against the kids in elementary school. Once they realize there's no way I'm going to win this, I'm going to change this to help me, right? And that's kind of like he would say, okay, now you have to hop on one leg. I forgot, you have to hop on one leg after he's already done the whole thing, right, on 2 legs. Or you have to tie your hand behind your back. Or I brought a blindfold this time. You have to do it blindfolded, right? Whatever it was, he kept adding rules to it. And honestly, this is what the Pharisees did. This is what the experts of the law did to the law. The rules were already out there. The law was already out there. It was established in Moses' time, and then these Pharisees, these experts of the law come in and add all these other things. Listen to this. This is crazy. On the Sabbath, the law was a man can't carry a burden in his right hand or his left hand, on his bosom or on his shoulder, but he may carry it. This was the added thing. He may carry it on the back of his hand. He may carry it with his foot. He may carry it with his mouth, his elbow, his ear, or his hair, right? There was all these extra, that's just one of the many laws that they're trying to add in, right? All these extra conditions that they tried to add in. And here's what I think is true about our culture. I think our culture is so critical about things that don't matter. And we're so indifferent about the things that actually do. I think we're so critical about things that really don't matter in the end. But then we forget what's really most important. I really think the devil loves this. I think he would love to keep our wheels spinning on things that really don't matter and let us lose our focus on who Jesus is and what he wants to do through us. I think he would really love to keep our wheels spinning on all these other things, all these other trivial things that we're so critical about sometimes. And we miss what's actually happening. We miss the main thing. Robin said this before. Stephen Covey's the one who said it first. He said, the main thing is to keep the main thing, right? You can hear the Pharisees' words to Jesus when they're saying he eats with tax collectors and sinners. Doesn't he know who's touching him? Doesn't he know that they're a sinner? Or, doesn't he know you're not supposed to harvest on the Sabbath or heal on the Sabbath, right? What the Pharisees don't realize is that they were the leaders of the church. They were the ones who were supposed to be impacting the world, the nation, for God, and they were supposed to set the example. They were the ones who could be helping people. They were the ones who should have been the ones eating with sinners. They were the ones who should be looking out for those who were less fortunate. Instead, they were critical of Jesus for doing what they should have done in the first place. Sometimes we wash the outside of our cups when we are quick to criticize, but so slow to help. But here's I think the main point. I think the main point is that we wash the outside of our cups when we haven't truly received the grace of God. When we haven't truly come to know the grace of Jesus that he has to offer us. I'm reminded of another story of Jesus. It's in John chapter 8. He's teaching in the temple. There's a lot of people there. It says there's crowds gathered, and somebody busts in the door. I don't know if it might not have been a door to the temple, okay? But somebody busts through the door, and it's these Pharisees, these scribes, come dragging in this woman. And they said this woman is caught in adultery. First off, I just want you to imagine that. This woman is caught in adultery, immediately brought to the feet of Jesus. I can't imagine how Jesus collects himself there. But she's brought to him, and they've got these stones in their hand, these big stones in their hands. And they said, here's what the law of Moses says. She's caught in adultery. The law of Moses says that we should stone her right here where she is. that we should kill her, that these rocks should crush her to death. That's what they're saying. And Jesus, like, kind of kneels down and starts writing something in the dirt. And then he just says this. He says, let whoever is without sin, the one who's without sin, be the one to cast the first stone. And he keeps writing in the dirt. And you can hear it. If you were there, you could hear it. These big old stones just hitting the ground as these Pharisees, these scribes just kind of walk off silently. Jesus, when he finally stands up after the last stone hits the ground and all the Pharisees are gone, he stands up and he sees this woman who's still kneeling before him. He says, where'd they go? Has no one condemned you? And she says, no one, Lord. I love what Jesus says. Neither do I condemn you. Go and leave your life of sin. See, the Pharisees missed what Jesus is all about, and that's grace. That's what he's all about, is grace. And maybe this morning, the best thing we could do is take an inventory of our cup. Maybe the best thing we could do is look at the inside of our cup and see what's there. And maybe it's time we stop only looking on the outside that we've cleaned and we've polished and we've made all shiny, but we start looking at the inside, what's really inside of us, the inside of our cup. And honestly, when we look inside, what we might see when we look inside is this desire to check everything off a list, to do all the religious things, to make us right before God. What we might see is we might see pride lurking at the door, this desire to be noticed or praised. What we look at when we look inside is we might see a really judgmental spirit inside our cup, one that is just going to criticize people who don't completely do exactly what we want them to do, live the way we want them to live. But man, I hope that when we look inside of our cups, we start to see grace. I hope we realize that no matter how filthy the inside of our cup is, the words of Jesus are still true when he says them to us. Neither do I condemn you. Man, it's this grace that we've received, this grace that frees us from feeling like we need to compete in religious things. It's this grace that helps us realize our condition and removes this burden of pride in our hearts. And it's this grace, honestly, when we receive it, it's this grace that helps us to give it freely. This grace, when we've truly received it, man, it's whenever we can truly give it to everyone we come in contact with. See, once we fully realize that Jesus says, and neither do I condemn you, we can start carrying around that same message of hope to everyone we come in contact with. And that's our job, church. That's our job. That's what's most important. It's what will always be most important, is that we take the hope of the gospel everywhere we go. Here's the deal. If you've never accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior, we're going to have some people up here who would love to pray with you, some people in the back who would love to pray with you. We'd love to have that conversation with you. But, man, let's not forget the grace that we've received in Jesus. Let's let it impact our lives as we go from this place. Amen? Let's stand and let's sing.